Buongiorno a tutti, buongiorno, io mi chiamo Maurizio Donelli.
My name is Maurizio Donelli. Good afternoon. I am in charge of Corriere della Sera, the motor section. I was entrusted as editor in 2017. I don't know whether we should call it a motor edition, because until not long ago I dealt with horsepower, crank shaft, whereas now we talk about hydrogen, fuel cells, autonomous driving, IoT, artificial intelligence. It is a change that has started a long time ago, but it has accelerated quite a lot. Personally speaking, there is a watershed between that world and this world. I mean, we can now I can drive many new cars before they are launched onto the market. I'm lucky and privileged. I've got 3 children. The youngest is 17, and a few years ago he was 10. And as was often the case, I said, Cesare, come with me. I've got a new car, and we tested, and we would drive around, and he loved it. And at a certain point, he said, Dad, how polluting is this car? And I was taken aback, because a 10-year-old child says, how fast is it? And so that was quite self-telling. It was a turning point, because the 10-year-old child became aware of such an important issue. The rest is history. And so a lot of investment has been made. Dieselgate has accelerated such a transformation. Suffices it to see what happened in the Volkswagen group and the conversion they did, because they were totally involved in this scandal. And the pandemic, too, accelerated this kind of development. For present and for the future, that goes digital. Many car manufacturers have therefore divested from traditional motor shows in Paris, Geneva, Frankfurt, and instead they have decided to attend the Las Vegas digital technology show. And so the digital open innovation becomes ever more important, because revolutions give rise to opportunities, and if those who are able to seize them can therefore focus and invest on them. What are the next developments to expect, not just in automotive sector? And that's what we are going to talk about today with our guest, Fabio Benasso, from Accenture Italy, Marco Gai, CEO of Digital Magics, Smini from CDP Venture Capital, Andrea Rota, Managing Director, Industrialist Club from Turin, Russi, co-founder and CEO of Innovia, Francesca Perrone, Head of WEU Staff Lab and Development Programs from Unicredit, and Zorzetto, partner Plug and Play and a member of the board of the Motor Valley Accelerator. We have a few guests that are connected from afar. Hello. We can see them on our screen. And let's start with Enrico Resmini from CDP Venture Capital. Mr. Resmini, from your own point of view, what is your idea about open innovation in Italy? Good evening. Let's start from what you just said. The episode, the anecdote of you and your son driving around. Well, we are in a world where new technologies are developed in a very short time. And being a journalist, you find it difficult to understand children's expectations, and the same happens with the customers and companies. Companies do detect in advance what is happening, but of course, depending on one's own pace and timing, open innovation is having a radar on innovation that can come from unexpected startups, small companies, from technologies that are unprecedented, unexpected, but that can have a disruptive impact on your business. What about Italy? Italy is lagging behind because our companies that are so successful, like the brands that our Moro Valley show, and they find it difficult to keep the pace because technologies are quite a few and they concern their own business sector. It is said that a car now has become like a smartphone with wheels, with a lot of technology. And startups are a fundamental key element that companies have to deal with and to work with so that they should start investing in these startups and do partnerships, because if these startups become successful, that is good because of the greater and closer relationship with these startups themselves. And so we have decided to develop and strengthen venture capital and startup network in Italy so that the government, public funds, and private financial holdings that want to invest find a ground that is ready to accept these investments. So in Modena, we have an accelerator so that we can work together with the various stakeholders, accelerators, technology transfer labs, venture capitalists, etc., so that everything is well structured and organized so that the company business world gets closer to startups, and so that open innovation is not just a title, but something true. And this is funded by Innovation Fund. This is the endowment that we have more than 1.5 million euro assets under management. And it has to be said that the results are there to be seen, not just in terms of input, in terms of the money funds that have been delivered by the government. And reading a few numbers, over the first 5 months of the year, more than 600 million euro in venture capital have been invested. You see, in 2019, the year before the COVID, it was 600 million throughout the year. So in 6 months, 600 million euro have been invested. So that is the turning point where we exceed 1 billion investment of venture capital that will motivate young people, boys and girls, less young person, to set up their startups. And entrepreneurs can therefore invest in venture capital, and therefore companies can find the courage to be involved in acceleration programs, to participate in technology transfer programs, to have shareholdings, and to do exit in startups. Every day there is an exit. The market has finally realized that these startups exist and that they are valuable. They give cash back to the market so that the new entrepreneurs can therefore aspire to become successful entrepreneurs. So there is a virtuous mechanism that is self-fed. So the first encouraging steps are there to be seen. Mr. Benasso, President and CEO of Accenture Italy, what about your corporation as you are? How do you practice innovation? It is one of the strategic priorities of our company. Forrester, that has just published our world benchmark, has identified as leaders in innovation services, and this is a must to deliver new propositions to customers. So Italy is one of the pieces of this puzzle throughout the world, and we observe what happens in these ecosystems. Therefore, we are able to interpret technology, processes, and having the expertise to articulate and implement innovative solutions in business projects so that they can be fully integrated and delivered to customers. So we come with the new value propositions, and we create them by investing. We don't do any leverage, but we do invest to be part of the governance, to be aware of the direction followed by a certain company, whether growth potentials are there or not. We invest in our centers. We have a network of world centers with the services, processes, specializations that are focusing on various types of sectors, be it pharmaceutical or fashion or whatever. And these centers have a global function. And we believe that a single element can become a woman. And I mean, there are many solutions that have to be well managed and supported by services and assistance. This is important for startups, for new companies. And so identity is important. Okay, that's good for if you have a good idea. But if you want to grow, you need to find an identity, a product, a service. And so it has to be resilient, because if customer buys it, so you need to really think of the corporate aspects. You don't, capitals, ideas are not enough. You need to have the awareness, commitment for the company to grow. And so our way is to help small companies develop their identity and understand what the entry criteria are. And so they can be supported in their growth. And so in the Moro Valley, this is fundamental. So if you have a virtuous system, so you need to have a context to create it, and this is our perspective of so you need to have an awareness. So the specialization in mechatronics here in Moro Valley, this is highly recognized because we've got global players investing on it. And so these various points of excellence have to be enhanced for innovation to grow in a systematic way that involves the whole territory, the whole district. So if there is an industrial district, it is easier to do business. It is not just necessary and enough to have a fancy, cool idea. It is not enough, but you also need to have a set of systems, processes, companies, and if the small idea is valuable, and if it is plugged in, it can be developed and industrialized so that everyone wins, benefits from it. Marco Gai, we know.
Una perché hanno visto che tu ce l'avevi, ma saranno cretini.
È la mia.
Ma saranno cretini.
So, how do you choose the startup that you want to invest in?
Raccontaci la formula magica, appunto.
What is the magic recipe? First of all, good evening, good afternoon. Let's see what our processes are.
Noi nasciamo con un obiettivo.
So we are born with a certain goal. We operate in a market that is the startup world, the early stage seed market that is the funniest, the coolest one. But it is also more complicated because we don't have a number, a product, apart from a prototype to make your assessment. And this is really close to the issue of open innovation. We, as a company structure, we are listed on the stock exchange. The first Italian merchant bank is Cassa Deposito e Prestiti, our government. We've got entrepreneurs, the private sector, and the market. And so, since the very beginning, this sets the scene. So we do understand what the market can look for. So, based on two specific drivers that were there, namely the closeness of startups to the market where they work, and consumer and customer centricity. So this approach is fundamental at the beginning. You don't need to make a mistake so that when you think of customer, you think of the end user, because a customer can also be another company that's buying innovation and being inspired can change its model. This is easier, of course, for bigger companies. For medium and small-sized companies, this is starting. And so this is a first parameter. And then secondly, since we invest on the digital sector, we want to understand the kind of service we can therefore deliver or assemble, just to speak in engineering terms, so that you can trigger off an added value service.
L'innovazione che in realtà è poi quella che vince. Quindi questi sono I primi due.
So these are the first two parameters, and then we can drill down into what we can objectively evaluate. So the team on the one side, the first team you have to consider is your team, because a one-man show for us is not the best. But if you have a team of 2-3 persons with complementary know-how and competences, and who can help each other grow and further develop, is essential. And we look into the possibility of building something with our talents and create a product that is aiming at meeting the expectations of the market. So a few years ago, you knew we were always talking about disruption. Now it's we talk about construction. It means building something with small pieces that you find on the market, and it's fundamental in Italy because Italy is a B2B platform. And then the international spirit of your activity. We're in Italy, in a specific location, but we would like to see what we could do internationally, because the reference market for a startup is the worldwide market. So this is a matter of making a choice out there. And I know everything is complicated for the reasons I mentioned before. We still do not have figures at our avail, but together with the market and with the team, we have to consider the ability of the team to adjust to change, because there might be a good functioning prototype, but the market is maybe changing. So if you can't do a kind of a pivoting, as we call it, and understand the technological value, then you won't be able to attain the result you expect. And then the business play, well, last but not least, the business plan is important, because in year one you invest, second year you lose very little, third you start to build up, and then you create one fantastic business. Concerning open innovation, a fundamental part of our activity, and thanks to acceleration packages, we can increase selection and we can increase the interconnection possibilities we have with the market, which doesn't mean we have to sell ourselves to the industries, but we have to have a clear ambition, i.e. to become a successful company. We have managed to do this on a market that has changed rapidly. We did open innovation back in 2015, and they looked at us as if we were, strange people. But now the eco market is able to capture these opportunities. But are there any resistance out there from the corporates vis-a-vis the startups? Well, I can tell you that a lot has changed. Today, there is much more openness. And I can tell you that now the financial investment in the phase where we operate is the one that is less necessary. Of course, we always need money. That's out of the discussion. But if I have a corporate that is part of our company, it has to yield money. An industrial partnership makes the difference. So the big companies are absolutely aware of this, and they work according to these principles. But as for the big ones or for the small companies, we have a cultural problem out there because they have always done things in a certain way, and they say we've always done it this way. But actually, our entrepreneurs are all great innovators, and this should be a kind of a comparison with a team that is capable of reviewing things in the light of the new events on the market. So this shouldn't be considered a limitation, but rather an opportunity. And if it's an opportunity of an industrial chain, then it's absolutely disruptive. In Italy, if we consider 100 the Italian enterprises, 96.4% of enterprises has never invested into startups. Another important thing, open innovation, innovating with the startups. At the level of big enterprises, we know that 48% of companies, they do this, as Marco was mentioning earlier. At the PMI level, we are now reached 12%. So it's the M part of the PMI, so the medium companies. So we have to change the culture. We have a horrible year before us. And this year will teach to the Italian small and medium-sized enterprises that the way they interact with the clients, with the an APE, no longer with the contact center. They make them realize that they have to work with startups. For startups, it's better to work with SMEs rather than with a corporate, because a big company is rather bulky and heavy. A startup, they would like to the startups don't like to come in contact with those big companies because they are afraid they can be framed. But we try to be cultural mediators because we see worlds clashing against rules that are impossible for them to follow or to develop. So young people don't want that. So just consider that if you do this, you can do a lot. You need a lot of commitment in the ecosystem and the ability to, consider that those investments will then become opportunities for industrial growth. Because finance and funds, they come at a later stage. But before, you have to consider industrial growth. Let's not forget that we have been experiencing one crisis after the other. So there is a problem with risks in the investment area. Yes, we all agree on this. Mr. Russo, are you with us?
Perfettamente, buongiorno, anzi buon pomeriggio.
Can you hear me? Yes, perfectly. Good afternoon. I wouldn't know what would be our time zone, but good afternoon. So you're a group of enterprises. You have relations with 14 Italian universities, a quite original formula for open innovation, which also has impact on the automobile industry. Can you tell us how this happens? Yes, thank you, Donelli. I would like to say that I'm very sorry for not being there in person. I had previous commitments, so I couldn't meet with you in person. But I'm very glad to be with you online. Yes, we deal a lot with vehicles and mobility. This is what we do. And we also deal with robotics. Robotics meaning industrial robotics for us, as well as wearables. As you and other speakers mentioned this before, and I followed you with very much attention, your contributions are very much in line and consistent with all the elements we have considered since 2015, which was the year when our company was set. So mechanical, precision mechanics, vehicle mechanics, and robotics are three important areas, and Motor Valley is an extraordinary example at the international level. On the other side, we know that there's a technical scientific culture that is amongst the biggest worldwide. We are connected with the Polytechnical School Milan, with the University of Bergamo, Polytechnical School Turin, University of Siena, and many more.
14, come lei ha detto, Donelli. Tutto questo abbiamo ritenuto sin dall'inizio, riteniamo.
And we believe that in this context of open innovation, we should concentrate on these qualities that are typically Italian qualities. I am a software engineer, and I also worked at the Silicon Valley, where I started working in this field. And I would like to say that it is worthwhile investing in those technologies that can give us an opportunity to bring to earth the Italian startups that can be generated thanks to a competence mix. How can one possibly do this? Well, first of all, creating strong links with the universities. So we transform raw materials as much as we did in the past, and now the raw material is the intellectual property coming from research projects with universities. Starting from this raw material, we create prototypes that we call inventions, and these prototypes, when they are transformed into an enterprise, we call them impresa. They are called impresa, and we encapsulate within an organization some realities that are developed outside, and we invest a remarkable amount of money into these projects, an investment ranging from 500,000 to 3.8 million per startup. Working in the sectors I mentioned before inevitably implies that investments are not consistent with the dimensions we are used to consider in the software environment. So what does this mean? It means that in the raw material transformation process that I mentioned before, you also transform something that we call value. It's value transformation. So what do I mean by that? Transformation and value construction. It means generating value thanks to the relationship with the universities, and do this in the vehicle sector, because there we have distinctive features that make us compete at the international level. At Silicon Valley and in Israel, there are realities that in software, cybersecurity, and finance respect do have a very favorable ecosystem, which does not mean that something like this couldn't be generated here. But in our case, we have to generate value starting from a very much mechanically oriented and vehicle-oriented culture, integrating the DigTech into it, and creating or constructing value. So once you have a mindset towards constructing value, then you have to accompany these new enterprises and new entrepreneurs into becoming integrated in an ecosystem like ours with the quality level we deserve. And the relationship has to be a favorable relationship between big-sized and the small-sized enterprises. We can do this with a new open innovation that sees companies participating in the development of these companies, or through the exits, as you call them. I share what Rasmini was saying, so I totally agree with that, but I would like to stress on the exit side that we should invite Italian entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurs. We have extraordinary entrepreneurs in the area where you are now, which means that these extraordinary entrepreneurs have not created their enterprises for a billionaire exit, but to build the entrepreneurial industrial future of this country. Now, this is my invitation to you, and it is correct to say that some of them should be exits and should continue to grow for serial entrepreneurs. For others, instead, it is important to create fantastic new realities as the ones we have created in this country. Thank you. Andrea Rota. You have invested into many different realities. Maybe you can tell us the story of one of those. What are the criteria adopted before making an investment? Yes, good evening, everybody. I represent the Club of Investors, Club degli Investitori. We are 250 business angels investing with a twofold purpose. On the one side, to help the Italian innovation ecosystem, therefore having an industrial impact. On the other side, of course, we would also like to have a personal profit out of this. We have invested into realities such as Satispay, for example, in terms of online payments, Everly or Supermercati 24 in the e-commerce, the Orbit, a reality you might not know, which is the best representative of the space economy in Italy, and we are anxiously waiting with the fourth launch with Falcon that should place macro satellite in orbit. How do we select our startups? Well, actually, we'd like to say, how do we select entrepreneurs? We talk about entrepreneurs rather than startups, and maybe we are the purest expression of venture capital. We invest our savings, so we're very mindful of how we do this. And I appreciate what Marco said. He's also a partner of ours. And maybe if I should add on to that, I could say that we are entrepreneurs-focused, entrepreneurs-centered within this ecosystem. And we look after entrepreneurs who have the ambition as well as the ability, the commercial ability to scale up, especially in Italy, an area, a territory, a country where we have fantastic technical skills. And very often, the ability of an entrepreneur to sell to big companies is what makes the difference. Let's take a look at the Silicon Valley story. Many entrepreneurs are commercial, top-level commercial business people. So what we're looking for is entrepreneurs who have a global ambition, who have a strategic vision that sustains them. So it is a kind of a element that can help them potentiate the efforts in the seed phase, in the so-called seed phase. So we, for example, imagine an entrepreneur that in 2 years' time is capable of asking for 10 million, and will he be able in 4 years, will he be able to ask for 100 million for somebody who would like to buy his enterprise? Of course, that is topical, that is really very important. So open innovation, how would you define it? According to you, what is that? Well, if the entrepreneur is in the middle, for us, open innovation is on the one side the ability of an entrepreneur to participate in the process, meaning that he should participate also with much bigger companies. And we believe that one of the values of these entrepreneurs, the outstanding values of these entrepreneurs, should be that of identifying opportunities that the manager of a big company is not capable of doing. On the other side, we would be glad to see that there is much more openness from big and medium and small-sized companies to buy services from startups and cooperate, therefore, with smaller entities on the one side and fund them, providing them funds and funding them, and last but not least, purchasing. The exit is a founding moment. It makes capital circulate. The entrepreneur is a hero as well as a mentor or a tutor for other entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur that does an important exit is teaching 100 entrepreneurs how to do this, and his first-line managers becomes a new generation of entrepreneurs. Looking at the Italian system, and today we will obtain 1 billion investments in terms of venture capitals. That's an outstanding result. Just consider that in Europe we obtain in similar countries 10 times higher levels. We have come in quite late, but we are making up for the time we've lost. Corporate venture capital funds made by big companies, and we know that 95% of companies listed in Germany has got a corporate venture capital fund for sure. In Italy, probably only 20% of them do have one. So we have many medium-sized enterprises that have learned. They do small acquisitions, and they've learned to work with the startup companies. And now we would like to see bigger companies that are capable of making acquisitions that become faster in absorbing both products and services from Italian startups. I do agree. I agree, because we have done it. We have done this. Last year we made 3 acquisitions, 2 this year. We have more acquisitions in our future, so 50 billion is our turnover, so we purchase for a few millions a year. The brains are still in Italy, so I mean entrepreneurship is here. It's valuable for us. We have scaled it up, and we have made it become the engine for the future. So you have to have a running engine that is ever evolving, that is global. From Borgo Manero should be a hub for the entire world. We now have a back office and a back end, and we have gone to big clients. Marco was saying we have the ambition that our small-sized companies can go abroad. I do share this as a mission, but from a pragmatic standpoint, I haven't seen this happening very often. I've seen some of them in Singapore, but one needs a more systemic vision. You need platforms, because if on your own you go to Germany and hope to sell your products, maybe you will sell something, but it's not so easy. For a big company becoming integrated in the local systems, it is very, very complex and complicated. Even if you have the money, even if you have the structure, if you're very little and you go to Saudi Arabia and hope to sell to Saudi Aramco, well, that's very complex indeed. I absolutely agree. These are very useful forms of acquisitions. These are startups that are not on such a growth pathway that may be interesting for venture capital funds, but they have an incredible value. They are acquired. It's called acqui-hire. It's the acquisition and hiring of talents. And I think it works quite well in Italy. Where we have problems is helping startups reaching interesting sizes, interesting dimensions. 2-3 unicorns worth more than $1 billion in Italy are startups that have gone to Silicon Valley, that work in sectors like the networking sector, so in technological areas, and that had to migrate to become successful. So finding an ecosystem, helping a startup going from a sales turnover of 20, 30 million to hundreds of millions and being worth billions is the challenge ahead. I believe that my friend from ICE-ITA can sustain it. If the system could help us more systematically and with direct connections so that we can get hooked to different ecosystems, I think then it becomes a matter of scale, of reusing certain connections that could facilitate our growth abroad, right? I mean, otherwise we won't be able to do it in a relevant way. I think this is the task of a system and of an ecosystem. Our mission here is to get an understanding of the network we can provide out there. I mean, you know, you can just buy a ticket and say, okay, let me know how it worked out. We're very lucky in a way because we have Italian Garden partners. Italian Gardens has 28 partners in Europe, so it becomes easier for us to have ecosystem contacts on the territory. But if ICE was there and would create the link, and it is a matter of opportunities with companies that may utilize Italian startups to go abroad, we could be in a very pleasant situation.
Okay. We still have 2 more speakers to go. Andrea Zorzetto. What about you, Andrea? You have 30 branches throughout the world. What are the formulas that you have adopted to work on the Italian market? Good afternoon, Maurizio and everyone. Thanks for your question. What is plug and play? As already said, 10 years ago, a famous American investor started talking about it. What does it mean? It is not just a question of the adoption of software technologies, but the software rules of the games now are applied in many other sectors, and it is interesting to talk about it because in the 20th century, the motor industry really, the Ford system, applied and extended to all sectors. And the same is now happening with software. What are the rules? The speed of collecting data and feedback from consumers and integrating them, being small and lean is an advantage, and that is why it is much easier for a startup to innovate as against a large company, and that is why we are a part of open innovation. Plug and Play was set up 15 years ago in Silicon Valley. It is where the software innovation cradle is. We do two main things. On the one hand, we are the biggest in the world in number of 500 open innovation companies and about 30 throughout the world. And then we are investors. We make a small investment, 100,000 euro investment, so really nothing. But we do a lot of them. We've got at least 20 unicorns in our portfolio. Dropbox, PayPal, and others. And we have transferred the model in Italy in 2019. And in Milan, we were super standard as a model of plug and play, corporate partners, starting from food, Esselunga, but also Unicredit was involved since the beginning. So they say what their problems are, and we find international startups that are interested in helping them. The international startup isn't interested to come in Italy to have capitals because of the reasons you explained, because we are still small, but there are big companies that they can be attractive. They can attract them as customers, and this works. As for the Motor Valley Accelerator, we realized that two challenges were there that are typical of the Italian market and that we can therefore address with this new program. On the one hand, we have made a lot of investments, but since we were founded in Silicon Valley, we are quite local. You have a quick return. Everything happens very rapidly. We are in the main road of Silicon Valley, and there are studies that show that if a direct flight is opened up with your city, the business flies. And for a few years, the Americans have really neglected Italy or other countries to invest, but including also the UK or France. And so we tried a way to invest more on Italian startups, and we will do that through a set of institutional stakeholders in Italy. CTB with accelerators, Unicredit, Fondazione Modena, and CRIF as a local partner. And this is a very good example of a kind of Italy that doesn't have any mega players, but working and pulling forces together under the same umbrella. They can persuade Americans to invest on the Italian market. And so there was a first application, and there are very good Italian startups in the automotive sector that are worth investing on. Another factor that is a key one that is quite different in Italy against other systems is scale, not just of cities, but also enterprises. If you have a look at it, we are in a superstar economy. Like in football, you've got Ronaldo, and the same for business, and then cities, the same thing. You have San Francisco, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and small is beautiful, okay, when it applies to companies and towns, but it is difficult. If you want to help the Italian system and to do open innovation with companies, you really need to pick districts, and Modena is the smallest one where we are ready and open. We've got Marelli and others, but we also have Dallara, Sab, Coxa that have a few hundreds of thousands of turnover, unlike big corporations that we work with abroad, which means that you can also create a program. Why are international startups interested? A big brand and company, given the slow pace and complexity. If you find an Italian startup that is ideal because it is quicker. And so the Motor Valley Accelerator is an example where plug and play is present to adopt this type of approach to a small but strong district and country. Thank you. And now Francesca Perrone from Unicredit, who is connected from a remote location. So, are you in the Gaudenti skyscraper in Milan? Not today, but yes, this is the headquarters. So, from your high observation vantage point, what are the main players and models that are developing? As for the open innovation models that we have observed are quite diverse. The light ones in terms of economic resources, skills, competencies, and corporate assets that are involved, down to more complex models that involve incubators, business incubators, or companies investing in innovative startups. For a long time, and still today, one of the most successful open innovation models have been simple, light, lean, where companies are part of innovation ecosystems and hubs, are updated with the frontier technology, start a relationship with the startup teams, but nothing more. As already said, for a long time, innovation has been a true mantra in terms of marketing rather than a strategic need. Now companies are much more dynamic, strategic about innovation. They hire professionals and teams that might therefore take care of innovation and are inspired from the outside in a more concrete way, and therefore new schemes are developed. One of the trends that are now observed, monitored in Italy, that new open innovation models apply, like venture client, where companies, the bigger ones, instead of investing on startup capital, they fund the validation of technology, the testing, what the small companies need at the beginning of their life cycle, or during the venture building. If companies want to be part of strategic projects, they try and accelerate these processes, looking for the right technologies from startups and through middlemen that are in charge, in contact with the startup networks. As for the sector, the telecommunications sector was the one that accepted the open innovation challenge, but now two other sectors are leading in the sector. Energy, power, looking for sustainability, circular economy, carbon neutral solutions, as well as banking and insurance sector. We can really experience that. And then the automotive sector, which is the topic that they are dealing with today. So there is a lot going on with open innovation. We are, as a bank, front runners. We do believe in open innovation opportunities. It is the ability to seize innovative potentials that are out there so that they can be included, integrated in corporate assets. And this is true for Unicredit and for our clients. And that is why we adopt many models and practice open innovation. We test and try it out from many points of view. First of all, we do direct investments with synergism with Unicredit. We can see that on a global level. We have analyzed 240 startups. 200 colleagues are involved in trying and understanding whether external innovation is aligned with our strategies. That gives you an idea of the kind of resources that have to be deployed to make open innovation possible. We have partnerships with the many leading actors in the innovation system. Plug and Play is our historic partner who does a scouting of startups throughout the world. We fund a local project that we're interested in, like Motor Valley, and then we also set up Start Lab, that is a business platform that I am in charge of, through which we identify the best Italian startups. It is a platform that has become quite successfully established in Italy since 2014. More than 6,000 startups have been analyzed, and so it allows us to work in all sectors with startups, and therefore graft the startup culture in our corporate structure. This is the first great advantage for Unicredit. Looking at the technologies developed by startups, we can therefore have a feeling in real time of how behaviors, attitudes change among consumers, competitors, customers who are looking for different customer experiences and services and products. So this really big asset of talents and expertise can be a factor of acceleration for our company. So we try and detect, scout startups to foster open innovation among the various companies. Over the past few years, we have set up 50 open innovation initiatives in various sectors. We introduce them to companies that might be interested in those technologies. So we organize quite a few initiatives a year with 800 companies, be they large, medium, or small, that have then started up pilot projects and partnerships. It goes without saying that open innovation is something that we believe in and that we will continue to nurture to support our customers. In this dialogue between large companies and startups, there are a few gaps to be bridged, because these are two completely different worlds. But of course, we believe in the wealth of opportunities and diversity deriving from these encounters, so that open innovation will become ever more successful.
Time is up. Thank you. And if you find a way not to make us drive for hours from Milan to Modena, please make that innovation grow. Thank you.